Never.
Never? You never intimidated?
Cool, calm, and badass.
Darrell Sheets walked into the auction expecting the usual dust, boxes, and the chance to gamble on the unknown. But behind one door was something no bid could prepare him for. What he found there didn't just change the value of a unit, it challenged everything he believed about the business he'd lived by for years. In that moment, the man known for bold moves and quick decisions found himself standing silent, facing a truth that couldn't be gambled away. The first secret under the lock.
50-watt projection lamp. Projection.
Mr. Sales.
The lock surrendered with a sharp metallic snap that echoed longer than it should have. Darrell felt the vibration in his chest before the sound fully reached his ears. That noise had marked countless moments throughout his life. Some victorious, some embarrassing, most insignificant. This one was different. It did not feel like an opening. It felt like a disruption. The door rolled upward slowly. There was no burst of dust, no stale breath of trapped air, just silence. That alone unsettled him. Abandoned storage units always announced themselves. They exhaled neglect. They smelled like forgotten time. This one didn't. The air inside was clean, cool, almost regulated, as though someone had been there not long ago and had taken care to leave nothing behind. Darrell stepped forward, scanning on instinct. At first glance, everything appeared ordinary. Plastic storage bins, neutral tones, gray shelving units secured firmly to the walls, cardboard boxes stacked with precision, corners intact, labels facing outward. No broken furniture, no overstuffed trash bags spilling desperation, no visible signs of disorder. Someone had been careful. "That's it?" a bidder muttered behind him, already disappointed. Darrell didn't respond. His eyes moved slowly, deliberately, the way they always did when instinct was trying to catch up with observation. Ordinary did not mean harmless. He crouched and opened the closest bin. Tools. Clean professional-grade tools wrapped in cloth and arranged by size. Not contractor leftovers, not household junk. Precision equipment. The kind you didn't abandon unless you intended to return. Darrell closed the bin gently and moved to the next box. Documents. Not loose sheets or random mail, but carefully organized folders inside plastic sleeves. Labels written in a steady hand. The dates stood out immediately. Late summer, early fall. Far too recent for a unit supposedly delinquent for more than a year. His jaw tightened. "This doesn't add up," he said quietly. Someone chuckled. "People forget things." Darrell straightened slowly. They did, but not like this. He flipped through a folder just enough to catch keywords. Technical terms, invoices, shipping records, nothing illegal, nothing sensational. Yet, together they painted a picture of someone systematic, precise, and still actively engaged with whatever this space supported. This was not storage, it was an interruption. As he moved deeper inside the unit, the feeling intensified. Everything had been positioned with intent. Even the empty space felt purposeful. Whoever owned this unit had not fled in panic or lost everything in a rush. They had stepped away expecting to come back. Unease crawled up Darrell's spine. He had walked into tragic units before. Remnants of death, bankruptcy, disappearance. Those spaces carried grief. This one carried control. At the rear wall, partially obscured by stacked bins, sat a cabinet that felt out of place. It was heavier, industrial, secured not with a lock, but with a keypad. The metal surface was spotless, wiped clean of fingerprints. The murmurs shifted. "What's that? Why lock something inside a locked unit?" Darrell didn't answer. He moved closer, heartbeat steady but loud. A keypad meant privacy layered atop privacy. That wasn't fear, that was protection. He knelt, examining the seams. No rust, no damage. Recently maintained. Whatever was inside mattered enough to secure twice over. The weight of the moment pressed down. This was no longer about value. It was about boundaries. He hesitated. Not out of fear, but because he sensed he was not meant to see what lay beyond. Tucked discreetly into a nearby folder was a small slip of paper. Numbers written lightly, almost apologetically, as if the writer hoped no one else would ever read them. Darrell stared at the code for a long moment. He thought about how often he'd told himself, if it's in the unit, it's fair game. That belief had carried him far. Now it felt fragile. He entered the code. The cabinet unlocked with a soft click, far too intimate for a storage unit. Inside, everything shifted. No cash, no valuables, no obvious reward. Instead, medical files, diagnostic images, prescription records, treatment schedules, Consent forms signed with handwriting that wavered just enough to suggest exhaustion, pain, or fear. Darrell's breath caught. This wasn't discarded paperwork. This was someone's struggle. He lifted one document and immediately regretted it. Clinical language leapt off the page, words no one ever once linked to their name, prognoses, treatment plans, notes written by professionals who measured time in margins instead of years. The room felt smaller. "Darrell?" someone asked quietly. He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the dates. They were recent, uncomfortably recent. The realization settled slowly, heavily. This unit hadn't been abandoned. It had been taken. Taken by process, by automation, by a system that never paused to ask if the person on the other end was still alive. Darrell closed the folder carefully, hands trembling now. The gambler, the risk-taker, the man known for bold decisions, standing still, silent. For the first time since the door rolled open, he understood this was not a story about profit or loss. It was about intrusion. And buried beneath the shelves and boxes, beneath the paperwork and locks, was something much larger. Not an object, but a consequence. One that could not be sold, one that could not be ignored, and one that was about to change everything that came next. What should have stayed hidden. The cabinet door remained open, and with it, any illusion that this was merely another odd storage unit vanished entirely. What rested inside was not clutter, not inventory, not even secrets in the conventional sense. It was evidence of endurance, a quiet, carefully maintained archive belonging to someone fighting to stay alive long enough to finish something left undone. Darrell stood frozen, his hand still gripping the cabinet edge as though it were anchoring him in place. The sounds around him dissolved. The low murmurs, shuffling feet, even the distant scrape of a dolly down the aisle faded away. His attention narrowed completely to what sat before him. He reached for another folder, moving slower now, as if haste alone could cause harm. Inside were treatment schedules mapped out weeks ahead, notes squeezed into margins, adjustments that hinted at setbacks, hope, recalibration. This wasn't an isolated appointment forgotten in the chaos of life. It was an ongoing struggle that demanded discipline, intention, and persistence. The dates revealed the truth. They didn't taper off. They didn't stop months earlier, as would be expected in a truly abandoned unit. They continued nearly to the present. Recent enough to tighten Darrell's chest, recent enough to suggest the owner planned to return. Then something had gone wrong. A cold pressure formed behind his eyes. Patterns were his livelihood, and this pattern was clear. This unit hadn't been taken through force or malice. It had slipped away quietly, through missed notices, automated systems, unchecked boxes. A human life reduced to an overdue account. Darrell closed his eyes briefly to steady himself. He had seen disturbing finds before. Remnants of the past, echoes long faded. This was different. This was current. This was still happening. At the base of the cabinet sat a smaller, sealed container. He hesitated again, instinct clashing with conscience. He already knew enough. Going further felt intrusive, almost cruel. Yet something compelled him to understand fully before deciding what came next. He opened it. Inside were personal effects. Not valuables, but comforts. A worn notebook filled with uneven handwriting. A photograph folded so many times it felt like fabric. A hospital bracelet kept carefully intact. That was when his composure finally broke. Darrell dropped back onto his heels, releasing a breath that trembled. This was no longer abstract, no longer terminology and paper. This was a person who brought parts of their life here in stages, trusting this space to keep them safe. The unit changed in his mind. The bins became checkpoints. The labels became survival strategies. Each item had been placed deliberately, during moments when the owner still had strength enough to plan ahead. "I don't think this is right," someone said softly behind him. Darrell nodded once, unable to answer. He had long believed that when a unit went to auction, the owner's story ended. That belief made the work manageable. Standing here, it felt false. Responsibility lingered even when ownership changed. He rose slowly and shut the cabinet with care. He scanned the faces around him, curious, uneasy, waiting. For the first time, Darrell Sheets had no instinct to follow. The silence stretched until he finally spoke, voice low and unsure. "This shouldn't be here," he said. No one disagreed. He stepped back, the familiar thrill gone, replaced by something heavier. Not legal responsibility, moral. Whatever he chose would cost him something, but doing nothing felt worse. He looked back into the unit one final time, committing it to memory as a reminder. Some doors, once opened, changed the rules of the game, and standing there, surrounded by the quiet evidence of someone else's fight to stay alive. Darrell understood that this was one of those doors. He closed the cabinet, not as an ending, but as a promise that what had been found would not be ignored. Consequences don't stay locked away.
Help me out.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's heavier than it looks. Pick it up.
The fallout didn't arrive with shouting or spectacle. It settled in quietly, in the hours after the unit door rolled shut, when Darrell realized he couldn't shed the weight of what he'd seen. He drove home in silence, familiar streets feeling strangely unfamiliar, as if the world had shifted just enough to be wrong. Images of the unit returned in fragments, the cabinet, the dates, the careful handwriting looping through his thoughts. That weight followed him into the night. Sleep came slowly, if at all. By morning, practical questions surfaced, each one heavier than the last. What responsibility did he now carry? What boundaries had been crossed, not by his intent, but by the system he'd trusted for decades? Darrell had always accepted storage auction rules as clear and final. Missed payments meant forfeiture. Forfeiture meant opportunity. This situation shattered that certainty. Legal anxiety crept in next. He replayed the auction in his head, scanning for errors. Had opening the cabinet crossed a line? Had reading documents that were unmistakably private exposed him to liability? He understood that legality didn't always align with morality, and morality didn't protect you from consequences. The idea of being pulled into lawsuits, accusations, or public scrutiny tightened his chest. Money never frightened him. Being wrong did. That afternoon, Darrell made calls unlike any he'd made after an auction. No buyers, no resellers, no eager deals. These conversations were cautious and deliberate. He spoke with the facility manager, then someone higher. Each exchange confirmed the same truth. The system had functioned exactly as designed. Notices were sent, timelines followed, boxes checked. At no stage had anyone paused to ask whether the person behind the account was still capable of responding. Efficiency had overtaken discretion, policy had replaced judgment. The unit never should have reached auction, yet it had, and now the issue was no longer theoretical. Word spread quietly. Details stayed private, but news that Darrell had refused to proceed normally traveled fast. In the auction world, deviations stand out. Buyers talked, managers whispered, some sympathized, others were irritated. "He's complicating things," one buyer said. "He's opening a can of worms," another muttered. Darrell heard later. He said nothing. The pushback wasn't loud. It was subtle. Shortened conversations, fewer shared jokes, a sense he had violated an unwritten rule. Don't look too closely, don't ask questions, open the door and move on. Darrell had disrupted that rhythm, and there was no undoing it. Privately, the reckoning deepened. He revisited past units in his mind, rushed cleanouts, quick judgments, moments he'd dismissed as not his problem. That mindset had once felt necessary for survival. Now he wondered how many stories he'd passed without knowing. That thought unsettled him more than any legal risk. Days later, confirmation came that the rightful owner had been located, alive, frail, shocked, unaware how close they'd come to losing something irreplaceable. Darrell didn't ask for a name. Relief mixed with unease. It wasn't victory. It was a reminder that luck, not foresight, had intervened. At the next auction, eyes followed him, curious, measuring. He bid less aggressively, not from fear, but from intention. Consequences didn't stay locked behind storage doors. They followed you home. They sat with you in silence. They forced you to reconsider the rules you had lived by and decide whether you were willing to live by them again. And once you saw that, truly saw it, there was no going back to the way things were before. After the door truly closes. Later, the unit no longer belonged to him. The shelving had been cleared out. The cabinet had been removed and the space stripped back to exactly what it was always designed to be. A temporary holding place, never a destination. Nothing about it hinted at what had once been inside. Darrell stood in front of the closed door longer than necessary, hands tucked into his pockets, shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't been on auction day. The adrenaline that once defined these moments was gone. In its place was something quieter, clearer. He realized then that not every win is supposed to feel rewarding. Some experiences are meant to slow you down, to interrupt forward motion just enough to make you question where you're headed. This unit had done that. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Darrell still believed in instinct. He still believed in risk and reading a situation faster than the next bidder, but he no longer confused speed with wisdom. He had seen how easily a human life could be miscategorized, overlooked, reduced to a line item and an overdue balance. And more importantly, he had felt the weight of being the one standing on the other side of that process. That understanding followed him into every auction afterward, the next door, and the one after it. He noticed changes in himself that he couldn't ignore. He paused longer before raising his hand. He paid closer attention to the details he once skimmed past. He listened, really listened, when information was offered. Not because he was afraid, but because he finally understood the power involved in cutting a lock. That power wasn't just about access or opportunity. It carried responsibility, whether acknowledged or not. The gambler inside him hadn't disappeared. The thrill of uncertainty was still there. The rush of seeing what lay behind a door still quickened his pulse, but it no longer ruled him. It shared space with something steadier, a sense of accountability that didn't need recognition or applause, a quiet awareness that some decisions echo far beyond the moment they're made. Darrell turned away from the unit and began walking toward the parking lot as the familiar sounds of the storage facility faded behind him. Doors rolled open and shut. Engines started. Another auction moved forward. Life continued without pause. Some doors close without ceremony, yet what they leave behind can permanently change how the next door is opened. For Darrell Sheets, that realization mattered more than any score or sale. It wasn't a dramatic ending or a lesson shouted out loud. It was a shift, subtle but enduring, that stayed with him long after the echo of the lock had faded. Privately, he acknowledged that he would never approach another unit the same way again. There would always be an extra pause now, an extra question, an extra moment of reflection before action. Not every door held opportunity. Some held responsibility. Some held consequences that couldn't be boxed up and sold. He also understood something else, something harder to accept. The system he had worked within for decades hadn't changed overnight. The rules were still the rules. The auctions would continue, but awareness changed participation. Once seen, it could not be unseen. And once felt, it could not be dismissed. That awareness didn't make his work easier. It made it heavier, but it also made it more honest. Darrell wasn't interested in rewriting his past or pretending this moment defined everything that came before it, but he knew it would shape everything that came after. It had altered his internal compass, the way he measured success, the way he understood consequence. As he reached his truck and looked back once more at the row of units, identical doors hiding countless unseen stories, he felt no urge to rush forward. There was time. There would always be another door. The difference now was how he chose to open it. Moments like this remind us that behind every locked door is a real human story. If this revelation changed how you see Storage Wars and Darrell Sheets, share your thoughts below. Subscribe for deeper, untold moments from your favorite shows, and stay with us as we uncover the stories that don't end when the door rolls down. Some doors close quietly, but the impact can last far longer than the moment itself. Stories like this don't end when the door rolls down. Stay with us, subscribe, and keep watching as we uncover the truths hidden behind closed doors.